Chapter 14 Hindered Success. Only meaning to close his eyes for a moment, Prince Facade was woke with a start as an exceptionally loud crash of thunder tore across the sky. Through the windows and broken door that was moving in the wind, he could see that it was still dark outside, meaning that he couldn't have slept for too long. Still laying on the stairs where his battle with Darknut had ended, the prince found that his back was sore when he got up, as was his arm. Dried blood was caked over where he had been hit by the enemy's sword, meaning that he would have to clean and bandage it before moving on, and then he realized that Darknut was gone. The wound that Facade had given the knight should have been fatal, but apparently that was not the case, since not only was his enemy nowhere to be found, but there was also a blood trail leading toward the door. The knight must have dragged himself away, but the still pouring rain had washed away the trail just inches after exiting the estate, meaning that he could be anywhere by now. Still, the stab to his back must have done significant damage, being that the knight hadn't been strong enough to kill the prince in his sleep, but somehow Facade was not comforted by this thought. Groaning as he sheathed his silver sword before pulling himself to his feet, the prince shook his head to wake himself up completely. It was tempting to go upstairs and sleep in one of the guest room beds, but he needed to move on, not only because his beloved Zelda was still in danger, but also because he didn't want to be around if Darknut returned with friends. Not that he was afraid, far from it, but that didn't mean that he was up for a rematch just yet. He was sure that they would meet again, but hopefully not until after his arm had healed. So after letting out a deep sigh, Facade walked to the door and stepped out into the rain. The cold pouring water helped to wake him up as he went back to the stable where he had left his horse, Perfection, and after opening the stall, he opened the saddlebag. This was where he had kept important supplies like the bandages he was going to use, and after using the rain to clean off the wound, he wrapped it. There was still a dull pain, but at least he wasn't bleeding anymore, so he put the rest of the bandages into the saddlebag, along with the reclaimed chest, and walked Perfection outside. It was too dark to see which direction his compass was pointing, so he got onto the horse and decided to ride until the sun came up. Then, not only would he be away from Darknut, but then he would also come up with a plan for his next move. "Let's go, Perfection," he said, making the animal start walking. "I found the first chest, but our quest to defeat Gargamel and save Zelda is only just beginning." Meanwhile, in the town of Port Hylia, sticking to the shadows as she moved into the town limits, Miranda tried her best not to draw attention to herself as she made her way back to the inn where she and her father were staying. Perhaps it would have been more proper for nobles like them to stay in the nearby island palace, but it was much easier to sneak in and out of common places, which was why she had convinced her father to stay there. None of the guards noticed her as she moved silently down the street, allowing her to get back to the inn without incident, and her trusty hookshot made it easy to get back into the room's window on the second floor. Her father's room was right next to hers, but he was also the heaviest sleeper in Hyrule, so she didn't worry about making noise when she landed in the room and shut the window. Next, she removed her mask and hood before changing out of her Blind the Thief outfit, taking a moment to dry off, then slipping on her nightgown before putting the recovered chest in one of the bags. The final step was to slip into bed, and then Miranda let out a long sigh of relief. She had done it. Her mission to infiltrate Eagle Prison and steal back Zelda's chest was a success, and best of all, no one would ever know about it. Of course, it hadn't been easy. She had been truly frightened during her scuffle with that Goria creature, and her neck was sore from when he had tried to strangle her with his boomerang. The good news was that she had survived and saved those custodians, but where had the little creature come from in the first place? Zelda's letter had mentioned that her father's friend Ganondorf was up to no good and would probably try to find the chests, so did Goria work for him? Was that the reason that he had murdered all those guards and then tried to choke her to death? Miranda was scared now that she pulled the blanket up to her neck and hugged the other pillow on the bed. Not for herself, but for Zelda. If she had really been kidnapped by Ganondorf, and he was even worse than Goria, then what horrors had she been subjected to? She had only met the sorcerer once, but it was enough for her to decide that she didn't like him, nor did she like the way that he had leered at her cousin. Zelda was without a doubt the most beautiful young woman in Hyrule, but that seemed more like a curse when it drew the attention of people like that brute. It was better to attract men who had a gentle touch, and strong arms, and blue skin, and a tongue that seemed to dance with hers when they kissed. The fear was gone now, at least for the moment, and Miranda found herself smiling again as she snuggled into the pillow she was holding. Now that she had started to relax, it made her realize how tired she was, and soon her eyelids became too heavy to keep open as she drifted off to sleep. A short time later, in the eastern woods. The rain continued to fall as the morning hours passed, but as much as Link wanted to return to the shelter of his cave to rest, he knew that it was not a good idea just yet. That statue monster had been trying to force its way through the trees and stone of what remained of the walls of Lion Fortress, so the young man traveled in the wrong direction for over an hour to make certain that he did not lead it back to his home. He headed west, his plan to exit the eastern woods, and then take the long way back around through the rocky coast. It was a pain, and would take some time, but it was better than trying to fight off the statue again. So far, it did not appear that it was following him, but still, Link kept going until he reached the edge of the forest. The rain was hitting him a lot harder now, and he didn't have the protection of the trees, but he had been completely soaked for a few hours now, so a little more water didn't really matter. Still, his task to get the chest was successful, meaning that now they had 2, and if Aghanim got his, that would make 3. Of course, Impa hadn't said just how many there were, but if they were lucky, the Triforce of Wisdom would be in one that they already had. Then again, these chests seemed a little small to hold something like that. Not that they had ever seen a Triforce before, but he just assumed that it would be bigger. The young man was still examining the chest as he reached the trail that led south to the coast, when a figure appeared in the distance. At first he thought it might be an Octorok or something, judging by the size, but as it got closer he saw that it was actually another young man with long hair, riding on a white horse. He was coming down the trail from the west, and kept looking at something that was attached to his wrist, as if it were telling him which way to go. Apparently it wasn't doing a very good job, since he was looking around like he was confused until he spotted Link. "Pardon me, good sir," he said as he stopped the horse upon reaching him. "I am on a mission of dire importance, and I must find—" The rider trailed off as he looked at Link for a moment, and this confused him for a second until he realized that this person was staring at the chest he was holding. Now, being that this was the rural southern region of Hyrule, there was always the possibility of getting robbed, but the rider didn't look like a typical highwayman. In fact, he looked just the opposite, with his armor and other things he was carrying. Basically, he looked like a nobleman who had gotten lost, and he was probably rich, so it was a shame that Aghanim wasn't there so they could do their usual routine. "That chest!" he exclaimed. "That is the mark of the royal family, is it not? You must give it to me at once!" The rider looked desperate, with a wild look in his eyes that spoke of urgency, but as far as Link knew, only a few people knew about the chest that Princess Zelda had hidden. There was the princess herself, Impa, Aghanim himself, and Ganondorf. Now, he was never one to just start accusing people of things, but these chests were needed to save the princess, and he couldn't risk handing one over to someone who might be one of Ganondorf's men. "I'm afraid I can't do that," Link replied as he stowed the chest away. "I have an important task as well, and I need to get this back to its rightful owner, so I'll be on my way." The young man started to walk away, but the rider moved his horse to block him. He then jumped down, further blocking Link's path while readying his shield and drawing his rather exquisite-looking sword. He didn't want to fight, especially after just going through that ordeal with the statue, but he was also not one to back down, so Link readied his newly acquired sword as well. "I will have that chest," the rider said with an angry tone. "I have no wish to harm you, but if you interfere, you will not be spared my blade." Meanwhile, in the Lost Hills, the tunnel of Lizard Mine continued to collapse behind him as Aghanim ran for the exit, but at least this time he could see where he was going, since the distant daylight illuminated the outline of the mine track. He truly regretted not being able to save the scout from being turned into that creature, but at least he had been able to end his suffering, and now no one would ever suffer in that death chamber again. Of course, now he had to escape, and if not for his ability to teleport, he would have never made it before Lizard Mine was completely destroyed. Reappearing outside the mine entrance just in time to get hit by the smoke from the final collapse, the robed wizard coughed and rubbed his eyes while waiting for the smoke to clear. It was so thick that he was unable to see more than a few feet in front of him. But when the wind and rain finally began to disperse, he realized that he was not alone. There was a figure standing a short distance away, tall and muscular-looking as it approached, but seemed to stop and hold its position once it became aware that it too was not alone. "And what do we have here?" the figure said as his features became clearer. "When you appeared like that, I thought you were a wizrobe, but I've yet to meet one of their kind with the power to collapse an entire mine like that. I would have used Quake, myself, to get more time, but I didn't feel the ground moving, so... Bombos? Tell me your name, little wizard." This person was certainly imposing once the smoke cleared completely, and the crashes of thunder and lightning from the rainstorm didn't help either. But so far, he hadn't had any aggressive moves, and it was nice to meet someone else who had magical knowledge, so there was no reason to be rude. "My name is Aghanim," the robed wizard answered. "And yes, I used Bombos. There was a creature in the mine, and, well, it might have escaped if I used anything else." "It appears you did right," the stranger replied. "Well, Aghanim, I am pressed for time, so I will be blunt. My name is Ganondorf, and I want everything you took from the mine."